A very good morning to everyone. My name is Harish, and I'm your host for today. Welcome to Unleash the Power of Data with AI in the Age of Internet of Behavior webinar. I would like to introduce today's speakers, Mr. David Chan, Managing Director, Mr. Dejan Dukarik, Executive Director of Engineering at Adnovum Singapore. They'll be sharing how organizations in today's digital age should unleash the power of data with AI in the age of Internet of Behavior. All attendees today are entitled to a complimentary data maturity assessment by Adnovum. Do also look out and participate in the 3 poll questions in between the session in order to be one of the lucky 100 winners who will be given a $10 GrabFood voucher. This morning, we are pleased to have Mr. Dutch Ng, Chairman of SG Tech's Cybersecurity Chapter, to deliver the welcome address. Without further ado, I would like to begin the webinar by inviting Mr. Dutch Ng to deliver the welcome address. Mr. Ng, please.
Thank you, Harish. Let me pull out a slide. Hi, good morning. I'm Dutch, the Chairman of SG Tech Cybersecurity Chapter. It's great to see you all again, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on Unleash the Power of Data with AI in the Age of Internet of Behavior. In today's session, you will gain valuable insight from our speakers from Adnovum Technology. They will share with you on how they effectively leverage data by utilizing artificial intelligence and machine learning in the age of Internet of Behavior. We also learn how to access and mitigate different types of risks impacting ML development. So, to our old friends and existing members of SG Tech, it's nice to have you with us again. To our new friends, unfamiliar with what SG Tech does, let me give you a brief introduction. SG Tech is a premium trade association set up to represent and champion the interests of the tech industry in Singapore. Within the rapid evolving technology landscape, SG Tech strives to create an ecosystem that anticipates trends and develop sustainable initiatives to strengthen and grow the industry. Currently, we have more than 900 members ranging from innovative startups, vibrant small and medium-sized enterprises, to top MNCs, whom we are representing and articulating any technology industry concerns to relevant authority and stakeholders. SG Tech strives to create an ecosystem that strengthens the community and help the industry or ICT industry to grow. SG Tech serves as active voice for the tech industry for actively and responsibility, advocating for change while remaining a trusted and respected partner of the government. SG Tech contributes to tech industry growth and transformation through national programs and initiatives that drive and enhance the Singapore economy. There are 3 key roles at what we do: the business enabler, as a neutral platform and aggregator for the tech industry. We have various platforms that create opportunities for our members. A responsible voice. We run sessions with various government industry to provide feedback and give suggestions on how to help the industry. As for industry insights, we provide knowledge and intel on updates and news so that members will be more aware of the rapid changes and they could adapt it quickly. As to coordinate the needs of subsector within the ICT space, we have formed industry chapters and committees to support strategic and emerging sector. We have classified our chapter into tech verticals and non-tech horizontal. Under the tech verticals, we have AI, high-performance computing. We have cloud and data chapter, cybersecurity. And for non-tech horizontal, we have digital transformation, Singapore enterprise, and smart nation chapter. Today, Company can join EduTech as a member, can choose which chapter they prefer to be involved in. Each chapter will plan activities and initiatives to engage their chapter members and the industry. EduTech also spin off committees that cater to emerging industry needs. For example, 123 Jumpstart Committee cater to young startup company. Gaming and education technology are gaining traction today. We have also formed these two committees to cater to the needs. Other committees are blockchain, data center, data protection, digital trust, government procurement, SME Go Digital, sustainability, and talent and capability committee. As new chapters and committees will be launched in response to the technology industry, continued growth and needs. If you would like to know more about EduTech, please do write to EduTech Secretariat at membership@edutech.org.sg. membership@edutech.org.sg. I also like to thank our partner at Novum Technology, SBF, Singapore Business Federation, Mato, Manufacturing Alliance Transforming Toward 4.0, and SMF, Singapore Manufacturing Federation, for supporting this webinar. I hope that you'll find this information helpful for your organization. I wish you a fruitful webinar ahead. Thank you. Over to you, Haresh.
Thank you, Dutch, for delivering the welcome address. Next, I would like to invite Mr. David Chan to take us through leveraging data for AI and ML in the age of IoB. Mr. Chan, please.
Okay, thank you, Harish. Thank you, Dutch. Thanks for having us being here to talk about the Internet of Behavior and make changes actually to the world. Let me start to sharing my screen. Okay, so I'm actually the head start, and just to give a bit of an intro about Novum, okay, of who we are, and then I will getting into a bit of a tips about the Internet of the Behavior, how is that being spin off, okay, from the Internet of Things and things like that. Then, of course, after that, then our head of engineering, Dayan, is going to be continue with you about a bit more deep dive into different topics about the machine learning, the software 2.0, and as well as on the good side, and actually as some of the risk that obviously that you need to take care in terms of the different practice and as well as the governance of the machine learning as well. Okay, let's start off with just a very short intro about Novum. In fact, Novum is actually originated from Switzerland as an organization. And we don't really have a very big footprint as of now, but we are very specialized in certain areas, okay, particularly into quite a bit of the advanced technology when it comes into the programming, actually in terms of using of the blockchain, and as well as quite specialized into the AI and as well as an ML model, okay, in order to try to make the differences and as well as our service offering to our customer. So as you can see that we have done and as well as we are currently dealing with quite a bit of the government bodies and as well as the banks. So which is the banks actually are getting more and more into the AI model on how they will be able to leverage the data, how they will be able to train the machine learning and as well as the AI model in order to help them in terms of the daily operation, and as well as how we'll be able to looking into the revenue and as well as the things on authentication and as well as the authorization part of it as well. Okay, so I understand that we have over 100 participants here. So obviously, we are trying to do some warm up here It is because that we will try to understand about your thinking, or actually what your thought process about what do you think your organization as the current potential use case of the AI ML in your organization. So hope that you will be able to have a thought and give some insights to us as well. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay. I don't know whether the customer experience is going to take over, but let's see. Okay, I can see actually the result is quite close. But when it comes in terms of the first choice or the first priority that people are thinking about is to do the efficiency improvement in terms of the task automation. Yes, so this is actually I think everyone's from the top of their mind. It can be going through a process of how the digitalization of a certain documents or certain data will be able to streamline the operation side. So this basically I would say is going to be a quite useful as a start of the AI or the ML in order to get the to get your feel and as well as to get your thought process going to see what other things it can be optimized. So number two is obviously on the customer experience, right, which is quite true as well. So whether it's on the credit card side or whether you want to now, particularly into the COVID-19 as a norm, then we will be able to see people are more getting into the online, and then quite a lot of actually a majority of the activities are actually through the online as well. So we were able to see such a large population has been, in fact, to see such a target the online market with the customer in the market as well. All right, so I think I will stop here. All right. Okay, so having said that, before I actually start into this topic as an Internet of the Behavior, in fact, I think in Gartner in 2020, between 2020, has been made some forecasts and as well as statistics. In fact, that I think whether we have in the COVID situation, their forecast is actually will be able to see that there will be 40% of the world's population individually activities will be digital tracked to influence their behavior. Okay, what does that mean? So that means what is that being implied? That will be close to about 3 billion people. 3 billion amount of the people will be impacted, or they will be digital tracked, okay, on a daily basis, okay, with the different kinds of the data and as well as of the device that is surrounding you. Okay, now with this kind of what we call as unlinked data, how you will be able to make sense out of those, okay, which is basically the topic here as of today. Now, reflect into that statistics. Basically, if it comes into the 2023, around that period of time, then they are talking about there will be close to about 127 new devices will be connected into the internet on every second. Okay, so we will be able to see what how large of the volume of the data, then it will be able to basically transmit or transfer between from one point into the other, right? So this is why I think that the internet world, and we all know that this is going to be a lot of opportunities, but at the same time, this is also that will be imposed quite a bit of the risk and as well as what we call as ethics consideration, okay, among the sharing of the data as well. Okay, so moving forward, so as we all can see that by taking from the whole data, right, with all different kinds of a device, so everybody usually will have more than one handphones, even though my wife also have two handphones usually, one on the business and the one actually on the personal. And then surrounding us, okay, there's a lot of data, whether you are doing your taxi booking, whether you are doing your shopping, whether you are doing any types of it. In fact, that we just have done a bit of the research and as well as a study. In fact, that we are talking about a concept of we don't need to do any more of the survey form, okay, to do any of the online survey to our customer. Okay, so for example, if there is a customer is actually to get into a taxi from point A to point B, in fact, that they will know, okay, the taxi company will be able to know their experience, even though by tracking about the speed of the driver, how the driver behaves, and as well as the route that has been taken. And then they will be able to predict and they will be able to forecast, okay, what kind of the sentiment about of this customer as well. Okay, so this is all about the learning of the behavior, and that's based on a certain event or certain incidents that happens, right? So this is why the Internet of Behavior is to make use of this data that is coming from the Internet of Things, okay, and then we'll translate, or what we call and transform this from data information into knowledge and even wisdom, right? So this is all about in terms of how we will be able to make use of this data. So human beings definitely will not be able to analyze and as well as to understand all this data. Okay, this is why the AI and artificial intelligence and machine learning model is actually coming in. Okay, so there's always be a few areas. Obviously, the customer data and as well as the automation, when it actually landed into your, for example, the customer data will be landed into your database. This is where that you will be able to make use of this data to understand their buying pattern, what actually their habit, what is actually what they like, whether they have been checked out from your shopping cart. All this will be definitely is something that you can think of in terms of the increase of the revenue, right? So on the right hand side, you will be able to see there's a lot of potential business outcome out from there. Okay, solving problems, okay, increase of the sales, as I say, replace of the multiple customer survey, also the buying habit, okay, from all different platforms, okay. How the customer is actually, the vendors will be able to make use of this data in order to do the upsell and as well as the cross-sell. Then, of course, nevertheless, based on this data, the machine learning model eventually will be able to help in terms of doing the defense of different kinds of the cyber hacking, okay? That talking about the authentication of a certain user, or even though authentication of the so-called different IoT device before it actually getting into your territory. Authorization also, right? Credit card is always using this machine learning model in order to do the authentication based on what they learn from you. Okay, so this all is about the whole around you, about the data, and as well as to make use of the data in order to do the certain business outcome, and as well as the defense in terms of the authentication and also the authorization, okay, of the defense before it actually hits into your territory. Okay, so understand the timing is getting shorter. One thing, obviously, on one side, we all know that the data is very essential. Okay, at the same time, don't forget about a lot of a story about the data breaches from different organizations. In fact, they make statistics. One single incident of breach usually will basically will impact an organization from a business angle will be in a cumulative value of more than $3.2 to $3.5 million. All right. So this is another angle of whether the machine learning will be able to help in order to do this cyber defense as well. So later on, Dayan is going to deep dive a little bit into that. All right, so up to this point, I think basically we can do another poll as well. All right, so the question here is, what is the current potential use case of the AI ML in your organization? Okay, whether it's still talking about the customer experience, efficiency improvement, and as well as the security posture. Change it. Yeah. So I beg your pardon. So I think the question is making a little bit change here. Okay, is about what is the maturity stage of your organization when it comes into the analytics or the AI or ML. Yeah, I beg your pardon. Yes. So it looks like we have quite a bit of the interesting vote here. Okay. Okay, let's see the results. Okay, looks like the result is quite obvious. Quite a lot of you are thinking about to explore to make use of the AI model in your production. Okay, so I will be able to see, obviously, I can see a lot of manufacturing, or even though it can be on the logistics side of the organization, maybe attending this event, okay, which is good. Okay, yes, I think into the production, eventually it will make the AI will, if we make effective of the AI, it will quite helpful in terms of the industry throughput, and as well as the productivity, whether you are using the robotic as well. Okay. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so since unfortunately, I would not know too much about your background, but just to give you some example in terms of the machine learning usage case study. Okay, when it comes into the different industry, insurance, a lot of them are talking about from the repair costs. A lot of them are talking about the optimization in terms of the internal process. Logistic, of course, the fleet management, the capacity planning, all these are actually one part of it. On the healthcare, of course, a lot of them are talking about the telemedicine, or even though on the AI in terms of the different kinds of diagnostic, etc., etc. Right? So these are just to give you some machine learning example, okay, from a different industry. Hope that will be able to help. All right. So without any further delay, I think I will just pass it back into Harish. Right. So thanks very much.
Thank you, David, for delivering your sharing. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Dayan Dukharek to take us through on how to identify, assess, and mitigate risks impacting ML developments. Over to you, Dayan.
Thank you, Harish. Let me share my screen. Okay, so before David was sharing about the big impact IoV can have on us and the society, and I would like to talk about what kind of risk this can bring and what we can do about these risks. And in particular, I will talk about some attacks on machine learning systems maybe you're not aware of. So the top two boxes you can look at, you probably know or have heard of. So you use machine learning to attack systems. For example, there are ways to create automatic phishing emails. There are vulnerability discovery and exploitation machine learning models in place. And there are also deep fakes and realistic fake news. Maybe you have also seen that, where there is a machine learning created face that looks like a real person, and you can basically not distinguish this from a real person. But on the other hand, we also use machine learning to defend our software systems, for example, spam filter. There are network intrusion detection and prevention systems, and we also use it to secure our authentication. But today, I will talk about attacks on machine learning systems itself. In particular, I will talk about three specific attacks. They're called adversarial input attack, data poisoning attack, and model privacy attacks. I will also give you some examples so that they get an understanding what kind of attacks there are around, and that you are aware of them and can protect against them. And this whole area is called adversarial machine learning, and it's basically called the field of research, which is about how learning algorithms can be compromised. So adversarial machine learning has gained quite some traction in the recent years only. In a report by Microsoft in 2021, they interviewed 28 different organizations, and they asked them, one of the questions they asked them, do you secure your machine learning systems? And only 3 of them said yes, 22 said no. So there really seems to be not so much awareness that systems can actually be attacked. And also when they did interviews with the different people at these organizations, they found out that traditional attacks, the people are aware of that. These are known unknowns. They know about these attacks, but they don't know how it exactly happens or when it happens. But most of these people were not aware that actually there are attacks on machine learning models itself. Basically, these are unknown unknowns. They're not aware that such attacks exist. But after this presentation, you will know about them and you will be able to take measures. And it's not something that only small companies are affected. Also Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Tesla, they all have been attacked by such adversarial machine learning attacks. And you can also see in recent years, there's a lot of research that has been done on this adversarial machine learning. Started very slowly 2014, but now last year there were more than 1,500 research papers published. So these are papers about the attacks, but of course also against defenses against these attacks. So it's really an arms race at the moment going on, which shows attacks and defenses against these attacks. So I would like to now very, very quickly on a high level say what is a typical machine learning deployment scenario so that everybody is on the same page and will understand what I talk about afterwards. So in machine learning, typically you have 2 phases. You have a first phase, a training phase, where you train your machine learning model. And then afterwards, you have a trained model. You use training data and a framework code to train this model. And afterwards, once this model is trained, you deploy it to production. And for example, you make it open via an API, and then people can send some input and you make a prediction. So I think this is an example. Let's say you want to have an algorithm that can distinguish between dogs and cats. So this is your training data. This means you have to collect a lot of data. Maybe you have your own data or you collect it on the internet. So this is the first step. Then you use this data with a specific machine learning algorithm. This is the framework code. This is typically a neural network for image recognition. Then you train this, and then you have a trained model, and then you can deploy this model, and then you can put in a new picture of a different cat, which has not been used in the training data. And then the algorithm will say, I'm 99% confident that this is a cat and 1% confident that it's a dog. So first, it's important to see that actually it's not typically not 100% confidence, right? For a human being, it's obvious this is a cat, but for machine learning, there's still there's often an uncertainty there, and typically the algorithm will tell you how confident the algorithm is in a certain output. So this is just the model I will use afterwards so that everybody's aware. It's typically a training phase where we use a lot of data to train our model, and then we deploy the model, and then we can use this model to make predictions, for example, here to distinguish between cats and dogs. But why I said before that there are attacks specifically on machine learning models. And the reason is, the question is why this is the case, right? And so in this slide, I would like to give you some intuition why machine learning is different. Machine learning software is different from the traditional software, and why there are attacks on machine learning models which don't exist at the moment on the classical software. So that's why you can call machine learning software 2.0. So I try to explain here why this is like that. So now on the left-hand side, you see the traditional secure development lifecycle, right? This is very established. There are many best practices. This documented. There is a lot of literature about that, a lot of courses and so on. So there is best practices established, and the industry and the companies know about that and they apply that. So for example, many companies that do perform static analysis of their code before they deploy it. They have some tools. I don't know, SonarQube, for example, that does some analysis of the code, and then see is everything fine with the code, and if not, fix it. So there is some tools available for that, but also we can do performance threat modeling. What are all the possible threats that are around that our code or our system can be attacked? So this is all documented, and people, when they try to defend their system, they look at this stuff and find good countermeasures to make sure the system is secure. So this is how it traditionally works. But now the question is, what is the key challenge here with our machine learning models? So you can imagine the big ball you can see here is the space of all possible software programs we can write. There's a huge space. There's so many different softwares that are possible. But in the end, the software we write is done by a human being, writes a piece of code. And typically there is an if then else, some for loop, as you know, many of you know this, very, very simple code that shows in the end what the program should do. But it's very explicit. So this is software 1.0. It's very explicitly written down by some programmer what the software should do. So it's only a very small subspace of this whole space of possible programs. And typically the complexity is also not so big. So that's why it's more towards the center, towards the outside, it's more complex programs. Because yeah, the human being, we cannot make too complex things, even though of course our software, right, we think it's very complex, but actually against machine learning models, it's not complex at all. And what is the difference now to machine learning model? There you have a lot of data. You start with data, then you have an algorithm, let's say a neural network, and then you let your algorithm run on this data. This is an optimization algorithm, which you can see here in the blue, goes through all these blue possible programs and tries to find the best possible program so that it can predict, for example, the cat with very high probability. So this is an optimization. This can take hours, days, or even weeks. So for very, very complex machine learning models, if you train a neural network, which has billions and billions of parameters, it can take weeks to program and can cost millions of dollars. And typically, the output of this optimization is just a bunch of numbers. So millions of parameters, as you can see now on the right-hand side. That's why I call it software 2.0. Typically, it's just a matrix multiplication with a vector. So this is output of your algorithm is a huge matrix, and this you use afterwards to make a prediction to say, is it a cat or is it a dog? But if you look at this huge matrix of numbers, you have no idea what this is doing in detail, right? It's just numbers, and you cannot read it as a piece of code. So that's the really big difference between software 1.0, which we explicitly write, and software 2.0, which we don't explicitly write, but an algorithm, a neural network, for example, will find the software itself. And in the end, the outcome is just a huge bunch of numbers, which will predict, for example, cat or dog. And this means like the malicious behavior and the vulnerabilities are deeply embedded in these millions of parameters. And the current security tools cannot find out, is this now a malicious program or is this program doing what it should do? There are just no such tools available at the moment. So like this static analysis not possible. And also the threat modeling, there are many more different threats available now than in the classical setting. So that's the big difference here is that you cannot use your classical tools anymore to analyze it because it's not written code anymore. It's huge matrices of numbers. Yeah. And this leads to a big gap to the traditional secure development lifecycle. I will not go into all the details, but there are many, many gaps now. If you develop machine learning models, there are gaps in the development stage, there are gaps in the deployment stage, and there are gaps also when the ML system is attacked. That's just one I mentioned, right? There is no tool available now that can do the static analysis of the deployed machine learning model to say, yes, this is secure, this machine learning model, or no, this is not secure. So I hope you get some rough idea or intuition why machine learning is different from the traditional way we write software. Because we don't write it explicitly, an algorithm will discover the software for us, will optimize it. Okay, let's go to the question number 3, the last one for today. What are the current barriers your organizations currently face with AI and machine learning? So it's a shortage of machine learning talents, budget limitations, low data readiness, uncertainty around its usefulness, or any security concerns you have. Answers come in. So at the moment, it looks like that the shortage of machine learning talents is at the top, closely followed by budget limitations, probably related to each other. If you have more money, you can hire better talents. But also the low data readiness is quite high. Yes. Okay, I think that's okay. We have now 54 answers, and we have a shortage of machine learning talents with 61% at the top, followed by 57% with budget limitations and 41% with low data readiness. Okay, thank you very much for joining this poll. Okay, so now I will talk about 3 common attacks against machine learning systems. So it's called data poisoning, adversarial inputs, and model privacy attacks. So let's start with the data poisoning. The idea here is that we feed bad adversarial training data into your machine learning model to make it wrong predictions, like that we put in bad pictures, adversarial pictures, for example, of dogs and cats, so that in the end the model makes wrong predictions. So I think the easiest is to make some examples here. The first one is about the Twitter chat bot by Microsoft. It was called Tai. They published this bot, and this is a machine learning bot which automatically creates Twitter messages, but it learns online. So depending on the interaction with users, it learns and updates its Twitter tweets. And then there were some people who basically poisoned this Twitter bot by doing interactions or writing stuff that in the end poisoned it and made this Twitter bot say things you don't want your Twitter bot say if you are Microsoft. I know, for example, Bush did 9/11 and Hitler would have done a better job. So, right, you don't want that this has a very bad impact on your reputation if your bot is saying such things. So this was a poisoning attack. Another poisoning attack was against the Gmail spam filter. Not in Gmail, you can say if an email has been classified as spam, you can click on it and say, no, this is no spam. And what some attackers did, they wrote some scripts that automatically unspammed many emails they had, right? And because this will then be used by the machine learning model of Google to update their algorithm because, I misclassified something as spam, so I should not do that anymore. So you can see there are some attempts to skew the machine learning model by some attackers, so to make sure that the Gmail spam filter does some wrong filtering, so that in the end, spams actually landed in the inbox of people because these people were successfully could skew the machine learning model by this data poisoning. So you can see these, even Microsoft and Google are not safe from such kind of attacks. Then I would like to talk about adversarial inputs. Here, the attack idea is to create artificial input. It can be text, image, sound, and so on, that gets wrongly classified by a machine learning model. But if you look at this input, it looks to you completely reasonable. So for example, they manipulate the picture of a cat just a little bit. For you, it's still a cat, but the algorithm will say 99% it's a dog. So, and there are methods that you can create such adversarial inputs. So let me make some examples. First here on text. This is a text against the fake news filter. So here's an example. This is from a research paper. The original text is perfect performance by the actor. And the algorithm rates this is a positive statement, 99%, which is obvious, right? It's well done by the algorithm. It rates it as positive. But then they did some optimization to find out, to create an input which is still positive for a human being, right? Spotless performance by an actor. This is a positive review of the actor, it's nothing negative. But the algorithm will say 100% negative. So they could find a weakness in this machine learning model, which they can use afterwards to bring down the ratings, for example. By just, it looks very natural, spotless performance should be something positive, but the algorithm says, no, 100% negative. Then also on voice recognition systems like Alexa, Siri, and so on, that you can change the sound a little bit. You almost don't hear it. So you can go to the link there I put under this box, which you can actually see some examples. And for example, here you see on the left-hand side, the voice says, specifically, the union said it was proposing to purchase all of the assets of the United Airlines, including plane gate facilities. Nothing suspicious in this text. And what the researchers did, they just changed this a little bit. If you listen to it, you hear some background noise, but it's still this text you hear. But what Alexa hears is something completely different. Alexa hears deactivate security camera and unlock front door. It's completely different and you don't hear it, but Alexa hears this. So they could manipulate the sound just a little bit that you don't hear the difference much, but Alexa hears something completely different. This can also have security implications, of course. So you can go to this page to listen to these examples. And the last one is an example for a text against image recognition system. In particular, here it's about traffic sign identification. So what these researchers did, they took, let's say here, a stop sign and just manipulated the stop sign a little bit. For example, they put some camouflage graffiti on it or some art, some patches on it. For you as a human being, it still looks like a stop sign. Obviously, right? This is stop, nothing else. But what does the machine learning algorithm say? For example, for from the left side, the second from the right side, 100%, it's 45 speed limit. So if you are sitting in a Tesla driving and the Tesla reads the stop sign as 45 speed limit, it's very dangerous, obviously. So by just doing these small patches, so this is a real world attack, you can just go there and attach these spots on the stop sign and then the car can identify this as 45 miles per hour. So this has been shown, this attack, that this is possible. And as a human being, you don't see much difference here. So there's also really serious implications on the security side here. Then I would like to talk about the last attack, about the model privacy attacks. And here it's about obtaining sensitive or proprietary information about the machine learning model by just querying the public machine learning API, for example. So one example is that, let's say you have trained your machine learning model, you have used a lot of data only you have, and you're very proud of your machine learning model. And now you make it public as an API, but just that the people can query it and you want to sell want to sell this, right? Every time the people use your API, they have to pay some Singapore dollar for it. And yeah, you think I only open up the API, nobody can steal my machine learning model. This is not true. So by just making queries to the API, people will be able to reverse engineer your machine learning model to create a machine learning model of similar performance, even though they don't have your data to train it. And this attack has been done, for example, to imitate Google Translate. Google Translate is doing a very good job, and they did an attack to query the machine learning model of Google Translate. And in the end, they could create the machine learning model that could also translate almost as good as Google Translate could do. And they didn't have to put in all the same research as the Google had to do. So be careful with making your proprietary machine learning model public. There it's possible to reverse engineer it. Additionally, attackers can also infer information about the training data. So you maybe think, I use it only in the training, why are they able to get any information? But actually, it's possible to get information out of it. So for example, on the right-hand side, you can see two faces. What they did, these researchers, is they trained a machine learning model with different faces. So they use, for example, the face on the right-hand side, they used to train. And afterwards, they reconstructed the face on the left-hand side just by querying the machine learning model. So they could find out what data has been used, not perfectly, but it's a quite good approximation. They could see which faces have been used to train these machine learning models. But this can also be used to get some other sensitive information. For example, if you train you're a hospital and you train a machine learning model to predict cancer, for example, then use sensitive information of your patients. And then if you make this public, it can be possible that people can reverse engineer that and get information out about your patients. For example, if some certain patient had cancer or not. So we also have to be very careful here with that. Okay, then maybe very quickly to recommended practices and about machine learning governance. So the first step is that you have to identify what are the potential threats to the system, right? I hope my presentation now gives you some idea what kind of threats there are around. This was not a complete picture, there's more attacks around. And then you have to think about, does anyone have an incentive to actually make your system misbehave? And if there is a big incentive for somebody to do it, then better take measures. But if there is actually no danger there, then maybe not necessary to take any measures. Then you also, of course, have to assess the likelihood. How likely is it that something happens, and what is the severity of the impact if something happens? Then it's important to build a threat model to understand all these possible attack vectors. And once you understand these threats that are around, you can develop an approach to combat these threats. So there are tools available that help you to test the performance of your system, to really, for example, to test if can it be attacked with adversarial input. There are tools that help you to detect that, how robust your machine learning model is. Also useful can be to create an internal red team. So this is basically an internal hacking team that tries to attack your machine learning models to find out weaknesses so you can fix them. And another way to do it is also to host bounty programs that third parties try to adversarially test your systems with data poisoning or adversarial inputs, or try to get sensitive information out of your machine learning models. I think very important because it's still a very active field of research, very kind of new, only since like 2-3 years, very active, and a lot of research has been published. It's important to stay up to date and know the latest research advances, because maybe I showed you these attacks today, but tomorrow a new attack can be here, and which can be even more serious against your machine learning models. So it's important to be prepared also for new attack vectors. And I think also a proper and solid machine learning AI governance framework will help you to manage these risks related to deploying your machine learning models. This can help your organization to learn, to govern and monitor, and also mature your AI adoption. So they did a survey here from the Wharton School for financial institutions, and there you can see there's still some lack of maturity in machine learning governance, but they already started doing it. So it's not that nothing has been done. So it's already, there are policies and standards for machine learning there, let's say for 50% of these banks, for example. So this is the first step, I think, to also think about how to set up a proper machine learning governance. Okay, that's what was it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dejan, for the insightful sharing. We shall now proceed to the panel discussion. May I request David and Dejan to join us for the panel discussion. Also to moderate this session, we are pleased to have Mr. Ken So, Executive Committee Member of Cybersecurity Chapter, SG Tech. Now's the time for you to raise any burning questions you may have to our panelists. Do drop your questions in the Q&A tab for us to have an engaging and insightful discussion ahead. Over to you, panelists.
Thank you, Harish. Yes, thank you for having me to moderate this panel. I think AI ML has been a large and common topic today. And then today, I think, coupled with the gaps that Dejan mentioned, I think it's an eye-opener. It is a big dimension that I believe will have a lot of questions coming along. So far, I don't see any question yet coming in. However, personally, I have some very curious question. Maybe for a start, because David mentioned a lot focusing on the use case and the maturity side. And I know there was a slide just now with like 6 example domains. Maybe David, would you like to share how can people usually apply ML into specific domain? Maybe just some example that you have experience, yeah, for the benefit of the audience.
Right. Thanks, Ken. This is actually a pretty good question, right? So, of course, when it comes into the organization in Singapore, right? In fact, quite a lot of us, or I would say the organization, because we all know that the SME market and as well as the number of the small and medium organization in Singapore are quite large, right? But it can be quite a lot of them is actually in the manufacturing, even though some of them can be in a certain financial services sector, okay, and as well as the logistics as well. So from there, we will be able to see some of the use case here, right? In terms of when it comes into financial services, definitely we'll talk about the customer churn, even though into the retail and as well as quite a lot of the retail industry. So the customer behavior experience and as well as that is quite important. So that is on one side to see how this will be able to help in terms of the sales increase. Of course, on the logistics side, how AI or ML definitely will be able to help very quickly is about all this logistic arrangement and as well as the capacity planning. Make a good example of then we have been talking to quite a lot of logistic company. I'm talking about it's not a very large one, right? Their issues is usually they don't really have a very good capacity planning. Okay, I don't want to make an organization, even though a pretty large organization in Singapore, they have this kind of an issue on I have a truckload, right? Then how I will be able to maximize my so-called my fuel consumption in order to reach into all different points, right? So all this planning, the route planning, how the consumption works, take into the order of the this calculation. This is usually AI ML definitely will help. All right. Usually a lot of organizations will start from there. Okay, because for the SME, another issue with that is in order to have the ML or AI works in that model, most of the time you will need to have quite a bit of the historic data. Okay, the more the data you have, the more data you will be able to train, the more data you will be able to sanitize, right? So this is also being one part of that. This a lot of organizations in the SME will be lacking. Okay, but we all know that the ML AI is the way to go. Okay, just a matter of how we'll be able to start off with that journey. Okay, then there will be a learning period for a human and as well as a machine as well.
All right, thank you, David. Yes, thank you for the insightful sharing. Now, the question is a question for Dian. I think it's naturally your sharing actually set my heart pounding very fast, because it's like for all of us to marching into the world of Matrix and Terminator. Maybe you can share with us with this new dimension of gaps that we can see today. So how do we share with us? How do we actually protect the ML platform in that sense? Dian, I think you are muted. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you very much. So I think important is first you have to ask yourself about, do you need to make the machine learning model you develop, do you make to make it public or not? Because this makes already a huge difference. If you have to make it public, then this makes it vulnerable to these adversarial inputs and model privacy attacks. So I would recommend, if it's not really necessary and your business model does not really depend on it, to make it public, I would recommend just authenticate and authorize the user to access your machine learning model. So this is the first step. Just really think about, is it really necessary? And if it's really necessary, then you can make it public. But if you make it public, then you have to be aware of these attacks I mentioned here. For example, for the adversarial inputs, what you can do about that to protect against these attacks, one way is to train your model on adversarial inputs yourself. So you create yourself adversarial input, and then train your model on that to make it more robust. So this has been shown to work quite well. It's not a perfect solution, because if somebody else comes and does create the adversarial inputs in a different way, your model will not be safe again, but you can try to use all the existing attacks that exist and try to create these kind of inputs. There are also tools available for that. You don't have to do it yourself. There are tools to create these inputs, and then you can train your model. It takes some more time, of course, and then it should be more robust against manipulation. So this is I think, a good step to go. Then for the model privacy attacks, one way you can do it, it's called differential privacy, and there is also a framework called PATE, which helps you to make sure that people cannot get information about the training data out of your model. And what this typically is doing, it adds some noise to your output and does some other complicated things, actually, and it also takes some more time to train. But in the end, it makes it very difficult for an attacker to get some information out of it. There is some drawback here. Typically, the more private your model is, the less accurate it is. So there's kind of a trade-off. So if you want to have very good privacy, maybe, or it will be a little bit less accurate afterwards. So the forecast will be a little bit less accurate.
Sure. Thanks, Dian. I believe the topic is very big. So audience, please feel free to contact Dian subsequent to this session. Protection is never easy. Now I see that there are two questions coming in. That's very good. They are very pertinent to and very practical. I think the first one is with regard to the protection of AI/ML in the context of NGO, right? Non-profit volunteer-based organization. So probably I will channel this to David. Would you like to take that question?
Okay. So the question, let me see, is it about
what is the impact and the benefits actually AI/ML would bring forth to non-profit volunteer-based organization?
Okay. So I mean, it's also matter about what kind of a use case, right, that people will be able to think of. Of course, I will not getting into the gauge of to understand which area of the NGO organization that you are dealing with. But usually when I see in in the days and when I talking about dealing with NCSS and those organizations, quite a lot of them are talking about in terms of the management of the voluntary, okay, which until now I think is still being a big issue, right? One is about the digital adoption, okay, using the handset and whatsoever. But at the same time, because a lot of those volunteer is can be do not really have a full-time job, or they will help on the part-time basis. A lot of them regarding those kind of a rostering and as well as their interests. All these we can think about how we'll be able to use this machine learning. It will be able to help them in terms of getting their proper planning going, and as well as the certain alert can be able to trigger, right? And we'll be able to have this kind of alert to in terms of to help on the scheduling, and also to alert on if there's any of the so-called exception things to happen, right? That happens into the luxury home as well, that we've been seeing, okay, on how we'll be able to monitor on the certain exception or the incident to happen, even though if you are making it too close to the side of the bed, and all these will be able to use the ML in order to detect, and then we'll be able to send the immediate alert actually to the people in charge, or what they call as the people that is taking care of the flow as well. So all these can be some type of the use case for some of the NGO organization.
Thank you, David, for the very pertinent answer. I reckon that with more specific use cases within the NGO, you will be able to answer better. So, Nisha, I hope this answered the question, and please feel free to contact David subsequent to the session as well. Yes, we have another question from Gary, and I think he's talking about everyday's use of AI and ML, and wow, this is interesting. What are the situations that ML would not be suitable for the organization? Yeah, so I'm not too sure whether David or Dian would like to take up this question. Maybe I reckon it's use case based, right? So it's more towards David. Yeah, if you don't mind.
Organization cannot use ML.
Cannot find.
Cannot find them, to be very honest, because as I mentioned, the data is getting more and more. Okay, we all know that this is actually the fact. So, and any in terms of the fraud detection, even those surrounding with the customer, as I mentioned, anything surrounding with anything that will be, even though to impact your behavior and as well as your experience, actually AI ML now is actually surrounding us already. Okay, whether you know it or you don't know it. So unfortunately I haven't seen any so-called ML case. So far hasn't really been so-called as a large rejection on it. But at the same time, the importance of it is, as I mentioned, the point of the ML definitely will have some role to play. But in order to support the ML to function and to execute well, right? As I mentioned earlier during the session, the practice and as well as the governance is something that is very important, and as well as whether you will have used data or enough data in order to feed the ML, so that this model will be able to getting more and more effective, more efficient, and as well as more well-trained in order to help you. Okay, so I think that is the point. Then how I see that it will impact whether a ML model or ML example will be suitable for your industry or suitable for your case as well, right? So this is why it is related into our offering when it comes into the certain data maturity assessment, and as well as to share the certain use case, whether it's something that you can think of, and then we'll think about whether such a use case will be applicable to you. And this is, I think, something that we can offer, okay, on today's audience in order to continue this conversation, and hope that we will be able to find a particular use case that we will be able to fit to basically to fit your need.
Sure. I reckon that is a very large subject. And now I also understand that all of us are standing between the lunch and the audience. So about time to wrap this up. So as usual practice in plenaries, I reckon it will be useful for the audience. if would you speakers like to share just maybe a short elevator statement of the takeaway of these?
Yeah. So thanks again. In fact, I think I just started and entered my elevator pitch already. But obviously, I think it's been a pleasure that to having us here today, okay, and to gain the insight about this session. So we all mentioned about data is the new power of today's, okay, and as well as the future, right? In order to be able to work around all this kind of a seas of data, we're talking about whether it's terabyte and all these, right? Now, use the machine to help, obviously, is the trend to go, right? How to start, where to start, whether you have a case, right? And as well as how the governance and the practice is going to be worked out. I think let's have the further discussion as well as a deep discussion of that. So as I mentioned earlier, I think our organization is more than willing to offer this assessment and as well as a discussion on a certain use case with you based on the industry. That probably the next step that is more than welcome to have you to contact us for the further discussion.
Sure. Thank you very much, David. Dian, elevator takeaway.
Yeah, also, just very quickly, so there is a huge potential in machine learning, and actually there is no industry that will not profit from machine learning. So that's why the question, like, there is no answer to this question. I think every industry can profit from it, and it will also help the people to do more interesting jobs. Actually, I think it also will help all the boring stuff can be done by machine learning, and the people can work on creative, challenging works and really create a lot of value. But we have to be considerate and keep in mind that when we do that, we have to do it in a way that is robust, is secure. We have the safety in place, because otherwise it can have very negative impact, which can really slow down the whole AI adoption. Because if people get afraid of the AI systems and don't want to use it anymore, this will have a very negative impact. So we have to make sure that we find the right balance by introducing new things, but also making sure that what we do is secure.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dian. Yes, we can see the direction of human civilization going forward with regard to AI ML as well with these considerations. Yes, we are aware that there are two more questions, but unfortunately we don't have enough time to address them. One from Henry and another one from anonymous attendee. So I think feel free to drop David or Dian an email on further questions. All right. So in the interest of time, I would hand over the session back to Harris. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken, David, and Dayan for the insightful sharing. I believe there are many takeaways for our attendees this morning. Also, please do refer to the screen for the email addresses of our speakers. You may reach out to our speakers via email for the complimentary data maturity assessment. So you would be able to see David and Dayan's email addresses over here. Also, we would appreciate if you could scan the QR code shown on the screen to give us your feedback for today's session. For those of you who have participated in the polls, we'll be sharing your contact details with Adnovum as you've given us consent for Adnovum to reach out to you after this webinar. Thank you once again for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our next event. Stay safe and have a nice day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everybody.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.